building and teaching unions placed a moratorium on the proposed development on June the 8th. Its purpose was to halt all work until talks between the Trades Hall Council, residents and the Catholic Education Office were held. Those talks were finalised last night in a 3-hour meeting at Trades Hall, which the President, Mr. Peter Barrack, described as beneficial. He says there has been a sufficient exchange of information to allow a resolution to be drafted. On Tuesday, the Newcastle Labour Council will make its decision. Either the moratorium will be lifted to allow work on the college to proceed, or green bans will be imposed on the site.
Good evening. The first of the semi-final weekends in the NBN Carlton Premiership at the International Sports Centre on both days. And the ground has been moved 15 metres closer to the grandstand. Will make for better viewing. Tomorrow, in the preliminary semi-final, Western Suburbs play Curry, and it's the second last chance for one of the sides, so it's an important match. Both teams are back to full strength, but I'd still like to see Bob Payton in the west side to give them some spark, although Peter Webber's a solid young player. The elimination semi-finals, the most important this weekend, to be refereed by Tommy Gustard, and the loser says goodbye to 1984. Cessnock play Waratah Mayfield. Both sides have had up and down seasons. Both sides have scored roughly the same on the plus side of the ledger, but both sides have conceded too many points in defence. I spoke today to Lindsay Gailey, the coach of the Waratah side.
For 13 of these guys, it's the chance of a lifetime. It's their biggest moment. So if they can put it together, I'm sure they will. We'll give them a nice old run.
You've never had to worry about your attack. The attack's always been there. In fact, you've got one of the best attacking backlines in it, with a guy on the wing that's scored more tries than many have for a long while.
You know, there's no certainty you'll play on the left wing to start with. So he's a full-back and he's a 5'8", so
you could have him anywhere.
Well, we've played with the idea, and whether we turn up that way at the weekend, we're not sure.
Attack's been good, but the defence hasn't been all that good.
Lee, I think the defence at times has been outstanding. It's just that we haven't been able to hold it for the full 80 minutes.
Who's the danger men for you?
Undoubtedly Finch and Hunter. Finch is the guy who provides the variety for them. That's why they've brought him to 5'8", I'm sure of that. But we're confident we can hold him up. Johnny Hunter's a good little player. He's playing at lock forward, which probably bring him a little bit closer in. He'll probably work off Finch a little bit himself, but we're sure we can combat that as well.
Both of those matches at the weekend could go either way. It's certainly getting interesting. At Wagga tomorrow, Cessnock High going against Ashcroft High in the final of the University Shield. It's the first time Cessnock have been in a final, I'm informed, since the youthful days of the late Dave Parkinson in the late 30s. From Beresfield, Francis Greenaway go in against the Henry Kendall side, also at Wagga in the Buckley Shield. Good luck to the two local sides.
Not without opposition. This scored an additional 50 points on the day, taking a total to 165 with 3 deep wins and 6. Teammate Ron Starr improved his contention by scoring 47 points to hold second place in the series with 120 points. The other half teammate, Stephen Dawn, also scored well with 42 points, taking his total to 103. This strength over the Motocross final has now been reduced to a lead of only 3 peak wins. There are 2 rounds remaining. Today at Raymond Terrace's Barley Ranch Circuit, practice is underway for Sunday's second last round. Round 4. Possible for Style on bike number 6 and Dawn on bike number 2. Closing on bike number 4 and making fight for the grand final to go against Torres. As it represents the last chance to score points before the grand final.
Which is the scene of this once only show, and this morning members of the Northern Photographic Federation were preparing their exhibit. The Print and Slide Show is an annual event. Unusual because it is a show. Tonight the audience will be seated and 4 judges will give an evaluation of the best photo. Winners and place getters will be announced in 5 categories: monochrome, colour, nature slides, pictorial slides and audio visual. Over the years, the monochrome section has maintained its popularity and is now attracting record entries. It's the ability to show light and form which makes black and white films so popular. The subjects are varied because the Federation's 600 members live in many different environments, stretching from the entrance to Dungog. The highlight of tonight promises to be the announcement of the judges' top 20, which should give a good indication of the standard of amateur photography in the Hunter. Rescue services were called to Limeburners Creek Road shortly after midday when the alarm was raised by a passing motorist who witnessed the accident. They found the cabin of the semi-trailer almost totally crushed and many dead and dying cattle. The driver was trapped for more than 2 hours. To free him, rescuers had to partially dismantle the cabin and use the jaws of life. The operation required the combined efforts of police, ambulancemen and volunteer rescuers. Miraculously, the driver was conscious and suffering only lacerations and a possible fractured ankle. Meanwhile, several cattle were destroyed. In all, 18 animals died. Police say the driver lost control of the semi-trailer after he swerved to avoid a car on the narrow road. He was flown in the Westpac rescue helicopter to Royal Newcastle Hospital, where he is reported to be in a satisfactory condition.
This year, Newcastle theatregoers will be in for a double treat from the Nida graduates. 2 Shakespearean plays, Torres and comedy Torres. The company began setting up for the 5-night season today. Tuesday and Wednesday nights will feature Torres, and comedy Torres will take place on Thursday and Friday night, with audiences being entertained by both clubs on Saturday night. Stage manager Chris Hutton says these names were chosen because of the similarity in the plot.
The fact that both of them have twists of fate happening to husbands and wives and children, and the separation of the family and then getting back together at the end. There's a lot of sea storms in both of them too. The husband and wife in Comedy of Errors get split up during a storm and each one of them take a twin, and in Pericles too, the wife is supposedly died at sea and she gets thrown overboard and they eventually come back together again and she's not dead at all, so it sort of gets all caught up together.
A funny thing about a lot of British farce is the fact that it's about rather unlikable people doing totally despicable things, and yet they're presented as just lovable old rogues. That's the way it is with Not Now Darling. Oh, sorry, what was I going to say? Sorry. A funny thing about a lot of British farce is that it's about rather unlikable people doing totally despicable things, and yet they're presented as just lovable old rogues. That's the way it is with Not Now Darling, a play that relies almost totally on rather blatant sexual innuendo rather than clever situations for its laughs, with the emphasis being on near-naked women being shoved into cupboards. The plot revolves around a couple of lecherous men who want to give a rather expensive fur coat to their mistresses, with the girls in question being only too pleased to grab whatever gifts they can in return for their sexual favours. Not very admirable. But I guess that's why the audience can laugh at them, and NDAC's production of Not Now Darling showed that the play still has a lot of audience appeal. A lot of the smaller parts were played very unevenly indeed, but director Margaret Tocker has picked her leads well, with Laurie Tocker and Michael Single doing a nice line in Panic, and Greta Warner as the wife and Leslie Woodcock as the mistress, showing that tough, hard-headed quality that obviously results in gifts of fur coats and frilly underwear. Well, I find this play very materialistic, cynical and sexist, but of course the answer to that is that it's only meant to be good fun. Well, I guess that's a matter of opinion, so if Not Now Darling is your cup of tea, I think you'll find that NBAC's production has a lot to offer you.
Today's launch followed yesterday's historic dual commissioning of the hydrofoiled Manly and the ferry Narrabee by the Premier, Mr. Rand. The Sirius is just over 25 metres long, has a service speed of 14 knots and is capable of carrying 250 passengers. It's the first of 5 twin-hulled ferries being built by Carrington Slipways, with the total contract worth $10.8 million. The vessels will be progressively commissioned as delivered, enabling the replacement of the older wooden ferries and the extension of services to Gladesville and Drummoyne. An additional 4 twin-hulled vessels will be ordered shortly. The Sirius is so light, being all aluminium, and the grease on the launching ramp so cold that it took several embarrassing seconds for the vessel to move. But once she did, it was all over without much fuss at all. The builders were ecstatic at the way she bobbed up and sat rock steady on the water. Mr. Unsworth praised Carrington Slipways and gave every confidence that the Tomago Yard will be closely involved in more ferry orders.
We would hope to be able to place orders for the third hydrofoil certainly by about 1986, and it should be built and ready for the bicentennial in 1988.
Is it possible it could be built here at Carrington?
Oh yes.
There's been talk for a while of a replacement for the Stockton ferry run in Newcastle.
Yes, there are 2 20-metre twin-hulled ferries that we propose to call tenders for, and as the company is experienced in this type of construction, there's every chance they'll be successful in that tender.
Demonstrates some aspects of applied science. As well, there are a number of technological items on display, including telescopes and what may be the car of the future. Many of the exhibits have been constructed by local school children, with entries in a competition being run in conjunction with the fair. Other items are on loan from the Questacon Science Centre in Canberra. Most of the displays at this year's science fair are unconventional, and as we look at them, is just not enough.
The science fair's main purpose is to publicise supernova. Its secondary purpose is to give the children in the Hunter Valley a chance to express their scientific talents. And we're also aiming at bringing science and technology together for the people of Newcastle and the Hunter Valley in the form of an exhibit.
The Supernova Group is planning a permanent science and technology centre for Newcastle. Plans have been drawn up for the old Parry Street incinerator in Newcastle West, but another site has also been proposed. New plans for the Darks Iceworks building in Wharf Road suggest that location is ideal for Supernova. The plans, which also provide for a motel, restaurant and offices, will be considered by the City Council's Policy and Priority Committee tonight.
It became obvious at the beginning of the meeting that it was going to be an emotional charge. Alderman Don Getty moved the Deputy Mayoral Minute confirming the Council's confidence in the town clerk, Mr. Barry Lewis. In a bid to cast that motion aside, Alderman Jeff Parker attempted to move an amendment which asked more questions. That was ruled out of order by Alderman Geddes, and that's when the trouble began. Finally, the town clerk informed the Alderman that he would only answer questions in writing, so that he would have time to consider them.
NBN Television cameras
was the final straw. One by one they filed into the chamber, claiming that the report presented Dr. Lowe remaining 11 Aldermen, and Alderman Geddes' deputy mayoral was carried.
This is a threat to democracy, and we... Deputy Lord.
About 60 people attended the party held at the Wallsend Baptist Church. The ladies chose to celebrate the all-important day with a light lunch, a few songs and a chat about old times. The Wallsend branch of the Red Cross was formed on August 24th, 1914 to help with the local war effort. These days there is no war to contend with, but according to President Hazel Johnson, there is still plenty of work to be done.
It started when the war broke out 1914, and it was helped to make kits for the soldiers and help send away things like that. And they had sewing circles and they knitted socks and all kind of things like that the soldiers and the troops wanted.
And what sort of work is it involved in now?
Well, we're still raising money because there's so much needed. They have hospitals, they help in the war, and they help down blood banks.
Once you come back, you just try and apply what you've learned through education.
That's right.
And a lecturer in science at the Newcastle College of Advanced Education. He will spend 3 months at the University of Michigan studying people's knowledge, attitudes and behaviour in relation to environmental issues.
Well, the area of interest for me is investigating people's attitudes and values and behaviour patterns with respect to environmental issues, and how this relates to their own lifestyle. And as a result of this, I'm looking into applying this finding to a better match between educational programs and the learners.
And how will you put that into practice when you come back here to Newcastle?
Well, Newcastle, like many parts of the world, has its own environmental issues and problems, whether they are about littering or the effect of mining on the landscape or energy conservation or use of national parks or whatever. And I hope that the courses that a college like ours mounts and other educational institutions can be better shaped for the learners that do these courses. In other words, I want a better match between educational offerings and the learners or the people who want to benefit from these courses.
Good evening. Tomorrow's major semi-final could have a great bearing on who's to win the 1984 NBN Carlton Premiership. It gives the winner a great advantage. The match is between Lakes United and Western Suburbs, who are, and it might even surprise some commentators to know, joint minor premiers. The two teams are about equal in the forwards. Both packs have pace, good skills, and both are pretty tough outfits. Both teams have non-specialist fullbacks in Todd Riley and Shane Matthews, both high-class players. They have attacking and talented wingers, with Western Suburbs' Glenn Murray probably the pick of those four. It's in the halves that things could be decided. Lakes seem to come out on top, on paper at least. They have the tough competitiveness of Rip Taylor at halfback and the creative class of Peter Walsh at 5'8", and he's in fine form. Walsh with the ball. The run round with Edwards. The kick came off a Curry player, as you saw. Walsh on the race to the ball and scored the try. No matter how well you tackle in rugby league, you must score points to win the game. West have one of the area's top players in Neville Elwyn at number 6, many would say out of position, but not making breaks at this stage of the season, and a top youngster, Peter Webber, at halfback. Coach Gary Martini rates him more highly than many. They need, though, to make breaks in the backline, it seems to me, and while he's a handful as regards training, Bob Payton, one of the town's real talents, is lingering in reserve grade. Now Payton, look at that, bolted into the daylight, had no room to work in, was round to player, the pass behind his body away to Hulbert, Now
On
it goes
Sunday,
away
it's
to sudden death challenge between Waratah Mayfield and Curry, and it should be a battle royal if Curry can rally after last week's disaster. They have too much experience for the bright but green play of Waratah Mayfield. Curry, though, according to reports, have now picked close to their best side at last. Mick Oliveira is in, so too is Gary Palmer at fullback. But I do believe that I would choose anyway a very good player, even though he's had a short season, in Peter Brady. And I'd leave the unfit players out. You know, this is the last chance for both of those sides.